Pawn to c4. Knight to f6. Knight to f3. Pawn to e6. Pawn to g3. Pawn to d5. English opening, Neo-Catalan. Bishop to g2. Pawn to c4. Queen to a4, getting the pawn back. Knight to d7. Queen to c4. Pawn to a6, preparing the queenside expansion. b5 may come with a tempo on white's queen. Queen to c2. Pawn to c5. Knight to c3. Queen to c7, the queens stare each other through X-rays. Pawn to d4, hitting the center. Pawn to b5. Bishop to f4, hitting the queen. Queen to a7, white to play. Pause the video and find the best move. Tic-tac tic-tac, I hope you found it. The idea is to sack a pawn to unblock the e-file and keep the initiative. Pawn to d5, a great move. Knight to d5. Knight to d5. Pawn to d5. Pawn to e4, a great move. White insists in opening the position. Black to play. What to move? If pawn to e4, a mistake. Bishop to e5, white is winning. Pawn to d4 was played in the game. Pawn to a4, hitting the articulations of black's pawn chain. Pawn to b4. Pawn to e5, opening the first gate to release the g2 dragon, and threatening to open the e-file with e6. Bishop to b7. King to g1, keeping the king in a safe place, and connecting the rooks to prepare the invasion through the open files. Bishop to e7. Pawn to e6, a great move, completely opening the e-file. White can get the pawn back after rook e1. Pawn to e6. Black is 2 pawns up. White compensation relies on the open e-file, her active pieces and the vulnerability of black's king. Stockfish says this position is in perfect equilibrium and gives a score of 0.0. Rook to e1. Black to play. What to move? If bishop to d5, a mistake. Knight to d4, a great move, sacrificing the knight to awake the g2 dragon. Black is paralyzed. Queen to c7, white is winning. If knight to f8, the best defense. This move is hard to find because keeps the king in the center. And white has compensation for the pawns. King to g8, a blunder, was played in the game. A natural move, giving back the pawn to keep her king safe. However, now white dominates the e-file and activates all her pieces. Rook to e6. Bishop to f6. Rook to e1. Rook to c8. Bishop to d6. Queen to a8, temporarily giving up the exchange in order to decrease white's potential energy. Bishop to f8. Knight to f8. That was black's idea when moved her queen to a8. Now the rook and knight are under attack. White to play. What to move? If queen to f5, a great move, the queen activates, protecting both rook and knight. Releasing the g2 dragon. Queen to c6, white is winning. Rook to f6, a obvious move, was played in the game. Pawn to f6. White to play. What to move? If rook to e7, a great move. Bishop to f3, white is winning. Queen to f5, a mistake was played in the game. Rook e7 was better to prevent the defense through the 7th rank. White's advantage has evaporated. Rook to c7. Queen to f6. Rook to f7. Queen to g5. Knight to g6, a blunder. Black position is very delicate. The only move that saved the game was rook to g7. However, it is understandable that black didn't want to move the rook because it is pressuring the f3. Knight. Knight to h4, a great move. Bishop to g2. Knight to g6, a brilliant move, sacrificing a piece to attack black's vulnerable king. Black to play. What to move? If pawn to g6. Black is a piece up, but her king is paralyzed. Task: find the checkmate in 4. Rook to g7 was played in the game. Knight to e7, the only move, getting out of the pin with a check. King to h8, the material is equal again. White has to be careful with threats on the long light squares diagonal. And with black's passed pawns. Queen to e5, pinning the rook. Bishop to h3. Knight to d5, the knight blocks with her body the checkmate on g2. Pawn to d3. Knight to f4, the octopus defends g2 and forks the h3 bishop and d3 pawn. Bishop to g4. Knight to d3. Pawn to h6. Knight to c5, white's horse jumped 4 consecutive times. Bishop to h3. Queen to e8, white is 2 pawns up, now simplification is the way. Queen to e8. Rook to e8. King to h7. Pawn to f4. Rook to c7. Rook to e5. King to g6. King to f2, centralizing the king. Rook to c6. Rook to d5. Bishop to f5. Pawn to a5. Pawn to h5. King to e3. King to f6. Knight to e4, threatening to exchange rooks on d6. Bishop to e4. King to e4, now it's a matter of technique. King to g6. Pawn to h3. Rook to e6. Rook to e5. Rook to d6. Pawn to g4. Pawn to g4. Pawn to g4. King to f6. Rook to d5. Rook to e6. King to f3. Rook to c6. Rook to d4. King to e6. Rook to b4. King to d5. Pawn to g5, and black resigns. Great attacking chess. White sacrificed 2 pawns to open the e-file and catch black's king in the center. To prioritize castling, black didn't defend one of her additional pawns. But as a consequence, white got the control of the e-file. Black temporarily sacrificed the exchange to decrease white potential energy. And after some inaccuracies, white's advantage evaporated. However, black position was still very delicate and didn't find the right defense. Then white sacrificed a minor her light squared bishop to create a checkmate net with rook and queen. Black refused the piece sacrifice, but lost 2 pawns. After simplifying the position, white got a winning endgame.